My daughter asked me to sign some papers for insurance. I trusted her. Weeks later, 2 investigators knocked on my door and said, "Your daughter has been billing your insurance for treatments you never received. We need your testimony." I went pale. Then they showed me the amount she'd stolen, and I couldn't breathe. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. I went pale. Then they showed me the amount she'd stolen, and I couldn't breathe. The number on the document blurred, the digits rearranging themselves into something impossible. It was a physical blow, a sudden hollowing out beneath my ribs. The air in my living room, usually so warm and familiar, turned thin and cold. 2 people sat across from me on my floral sofa, a man and a woman. They had identified themselves with badges and polite, serious smiles. Mr. Thorne from the State Insurance Bureau's Special Investigations Unit and his associate, Ms. Ruiz. They had called ahead asking if they could come by to discuss a sensitive matter concerning my health insurance. I had assumed it was a routine audit, a paperwork mix-up. I had made tea. "This is a preliminary document, Mrs. Vaughn," Mr. Thorne said. His voice was calm, a neutral instrument. "It outlines claims paid out by your insurer, Heritage Mutual, over the past 18 months for a series of medical treatments and procedures. Oncology treatments." "Oncology," I repeated. The word felt strange in my mouth. I placed my teacup on the coaster. My hand did not shake. Not yet. It simply withdrew, as if of its own accord, to my lap. There must be a mistake. I haven't had any cancer treatments. I've been perfectly healthy. Ms. Ruiz opened a folder. She slid a photocopy toward me. It was a claim form. My name, my policy number, dates of service, codes for chemotherapy drugs I could not pronounce, a provider's stamp from a clinic called Metro Regional Oncology Associates. I had never heard of it. "The claims were extensive," Mr. Thorne continued. "They followed a standard pattern for a certain type of breast cancer treatment. They were all approved and paid. The total disbursement, as you see, is $287,416. I looked at the number again. $287,000. It was not a medical bill. It was a house. It was a lifetime of savings. It was an abstract, monstrous fact that refused to connect to my reality. "I don't understand," I said, and my voice was my own, steady and quiet. "How could this happen? Someone used my identity." "That's what we're here to determine," Mr. Thorne said. He had kind eyes, I noted distantly. He did not relish this. The payments were not sent to medical providers directly in all cases. A significant portion was issued to you via check for alleged out-of-network care and ancillary costs. Those checks were deposited into a joint bank account. He let the sentence hang. The room was very quiet. I could hear the clock on the mantel, a steady, accusing tick. I could see the sunlight catching dust motes over my azalea plant. Normal things. The world had not ended, yet here was its ending printed on cheap paper. "A joint account," I said. "With a Danielle Vaughn Carter," Ms. Ruiz supplied. She consulted her notes. "Your daughter." There was no gasp, no cry. It was a silence so complete it had a sound all its own, a high-pitched hum in my ears. The pieces, sharp and ugly, clicked into place. They did not form a picture I recognized. "Danny," I said. A memory surfaced, clear and bright and utterly poisonous. Danny in this same living room, maybe a year and a half ago. She had brought over papers saying it was a new HIPAA compliance form and a beneficiary update from the insurance company. "Just bureaucracy, Mama," she had said, her smile easy. "They're making everything digital, but they still need a wet signature for the archive. You know how it is." She had a pen ready. She pointed to the flagged lines. "Here and here, and just a quick initial there." I had signed. I was making soup. I remember worrying the carrots were chopped too large. I trusted her. She was my daughter, a healthcare administrator. She handled forms for a living. I had signed my name. I had initialed. I had gone back to my soup. "The signatures on the claim forms are forgeries," Mr. Thorne said, his tone gentler now, seeing the understanding dawning on my face. It was a clinical term. Forgery. A crime. Expert analysis confirms they are not yours. They are skilled, but they are not yours. The bank signatures for deposit match your daughter's. Why? The word was small, stripped bare. We can't speak to motive, Ms. Ruiz said. Our investigation focuses on the facts of the fraud. The scheme was elaborate. It involved fabricated physician notes, falsified treatment schedules, and a post office box registered to receive correspondence. It was not an impulsive act. I looked from one professional face to the other. They were waiting. They had presented me with the unthinkable truth, and now they were waiting for my reaction. They needed something from me. Cooperation, a statement, a choice. What happens now? I asked. Mr. Thorne leaned forward slightly. The evidence is substantial, Mrs. Vaughn. We have a strong case. Our next step is to present it to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. Insurance fraud of this magnitude is a felony. There would be a trial or, more likely, a plea agreement. Restitution would be ordered. Restitution. My daughter, ordered to pay back a sum of money that was a fantasy, a debt that could never be repaid in currency alone. But our case is stronger with your full cooperation, he continued. You are the victim. Your testimony about the signing of those original documents, your lack of medical treatment, your relationship, it is crucial. We need you to work with us. He was offering me a role. I could be the victim who helped them prosecute my child, or I could be the mother who denied, who protected, who made excuses. I saw the two paths diverge in front of me, both leading into a dark wood. What if I don't? I heard myself ask. What if I say it was all a misunderstanding? Ms. Ruiz's expression tightened, just a fraction. Without your cooperation, the case becomes more difficult. The defense would argue you were complicit or cognitively impaired. They would attack your credibility. The chances of a full recovery of the funds diminish significantly. The system, she said with a slight pragmatic shrug, often fails silent victims. The system. I looked at the papers on my coffee table, displacing the latest issue of Southern Living. This was the system. Impersonal, paper-based, slow-moving. It had been weaponized against me by the person I loved most, and now it was offering me a sword, hilt first, and asking me to decide if I had the strength to lift it. I stood up. My legs held. I walked to the window and looked out at my front garden. The peonies were just thinking about blooming. I had planted them with my husband 20 years ago. A simple, normal thing. I turned back to the room. The investigators watched me, their faces masks of professional patience. I need to think, I said. I need time. Of course, Mr. Thorne said, rising. He placed his card on the table. Please take whatever time you need, but understand the process is already in motion. We will be in touch. They left quietly. I did not see them out. I stood in the center of the room, the silence now a heavy, smothering thing. I looked at the teacup, still half full, growing cold. I looked at the family portrait on the wall, a younger Danny beaming between me and her father, the smile that had once been my son. I picked up the document again. I forced myself to read every line, every fake treatment date, every fraudulent code. $287,416. The numbers were no longer abstract. They were the exact price of a trust I had not known I had sold. I had signed it away for a pot of soup. The shaking started then, a fine, constant tremor in my hands. I clasped them together, but it traveled up my arms, into my shoulders. It was not grief, not yet. It was the cold, hard onset of a terrible and necessary clarity. My world had not shattered with a noise. It had simply, quietly, turned to ash. And I was standing in the center of it, perfectly intact and utterly alone. The tremor in my hands subsided into a dull, constant ache. I placed the document on the coffee table, aligning its edges perfectly with the table's corner. The action was mechanical, a need for order in a room that now felt like a violated space. I picked up the cold teacup and carried it to the kitchen. I washed it, dried it, and returned it to the cupboard. Each movement was deliberate, a temporary dam against the flood of questions. I stood at the kitchen counter, my palms flat on the cool laminate. The investigator's card lay next to my recipe box. I did not pick it up. First, I needed to hear her voice. I needed to give her a chance, a single definitive chance to explain this impossible thing. I took my cordless phone from its charger and walked to the living room window. The afternoon light was softening. I dialed her number from memory. It rang 3 times. "Hey, Mama." Her voice was bright, slightly distracted. I could hear keyboard clicks in the background. "Everything okay?" "Danny." My own voice sounded foreign, too even. "I need to talk to you. It's important." The typing stopped. "Sure. What's up? You sound funny." 2 people from the State Insurance Bureau came to see me today, a Mr. Thorne and a Ms. Ruiz. I paused, letting the names sit in the silence that followed. They had some very serious papers with them. "Insurance Bureau?" she said. The brightness was gone, replaced by a careful neutrality. "What about?" They showed me claims for cancer treatments under my name, amounting to over $287,000. I recited the figure without inflection. They said the money was deposited into our joint account. The silence was longer this time. It was not a confused silence. It was a calculating one. I could almost hear the gears turning, the rapid evaluation of lies. "Mama, that's insane," she finally said. Her laugh was a short, brittle sound. "That has to be a mistake. Identity theft is so common these days. They probably got your social from some data breach. You should cancel that account." They said the signatures on the forms were forgeries, but the bank signatures for deposit matched yours. Another pause. I stared at the peonies outside, their tight buds still closed. "Well, that doesn't make any sense," she said, her voice gaining a defensive edge. "Maybe they're wrong, or maybe—" "Mama, have you been feeling okay? You know, mentally? You've been forgetful lately. Maybe you signed something and don't remember. Those forms are complicated." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. She was steering the conversation exactly where Ms. Ruiz had predicted. Cognitively impaired. I saw the strategy unfold in real time. "I have not been forgetful," I stated, each word clear. "I did not have cancer. I did not sign up for chemotherapy. They have dates, Danny, specific dates over the last year and a half. Where was I on those days?" "How should I know?" The defensiveness sharpened. "You're your own person. You go to the garden club, you have lunch with Beatrice. I don't keep your calendar." They mentioned a clinic, Metro Regional Oncology. Have you heard of it? No, of course not. They mentioned a post office box set up for correspondence related to these claims. I don't know anything about a P.O. box. Her voice rose, a note of frustration masking the panic I now knew was there. Why are you interrogating me? These people are clearly trying to scam you, or the system messed up, and now they're looking for someone to blame. You need a lawyer, not to accuse me. I am not accusing you, I said, though the statement was now a technicality. I am telling you what they told me. They said the evidence is substantial. They asked for my cooperation in their case. The line went so quiet I thought it had disconnected. Then her voice came back, lower, strained. Cooperation? What does that mean? It means testifying. It means helping them prosecute the person who committed the fraud. You wouldn't. It was a statement, but it was a question. It was a plea. They said if I don't cooperate, they might think I was involved, or that I was not competent. They said the system often fails silent victims. I repeated Ms. Ruiz's words, verbatim. They tasted like ash. So you're just going to believe these strangers over me? Your own daughter? The hurt in her voice was a practiced instrument. I had heard it before, when she was a teenager denied a later curfew. It had worked then. After everything I've done for you, I'm the one who handles your paperwork, who deals with the doctors, who checks in on you. This is the thanks I get? To be thrown to the wolves because of some bureaucratic error? Each word was a carefully placed stone, building a wall of guilt. I leaned my forehead against the cool window glass. I looked at the family portrait across the room. In it, Danny was 10, her front teeth too big for her smile, her arm thrown around my neck with unself-conscious love. "Do you remember," I said quietly, "when you brought over those insurance papers to sign? It was a while ago. You said they were HIPAA forms and a beneficiary update." A beat of silence. "Vaguely, there's always paperwork. You had a pen. You pointed where to sign. I was making soup." "I don't remember specifics, Mama. I help you with lots of things." Her tone was dismissive, a brush off. "I signed them," I said. "I trusted you. And I'm telling you, you're confused." The shout was sudden, sharp. "You're a senior citizen, for God's sake. You get confused. Maybe you signed something you shouldn't have, and now you're twisting it into some story about me stealing from you. That's sick. Do you hear yourself?" There it was, the final pivot. Not just denial, but an attack on my reality, my sanity. The cold knot in my stomach dissolved, replaced by a solid, glacial certainty. All doubt evaporated. The woman on the phone was not my little girl. She was a stranger who had looked into my eyes and orchestrated my ruin, and who was now willing to call me a feeble-minded old woman to save herself. I did not feel anger yet. I felt a profound, clarifying detachment. "I hear myself perfectly," I said, my voice now devoid of all emotion. "And I have heard you. Thank you for explaining your perspective." "Mama, wait!" "I have to go now, Danielle." I pressed the end button on the phone. The quiet of the house returned, but it was different. It was no longer a smothering silence. It was a clean, empty space. I placed the phone on the table next to Mr. Thorne's card. I walked to the family portrait and took it down from the wall. The glass was dusty. I carried it to the hall closet, opened the door, and placed it face down on a high shelf behind the spare blankets. I did not do it in a fit of passion. It was a simple administrative task. The person in that picture no longer existed. Returning to the living room, I picked up the investigator's card. The cardstock was smooth and heavy. I read the embossed text, Marcus Thorne, Special Investigator, a telephone number, an email address. I had given her the chance. She had chosen her path. Now I would choose mine. The first ember of something decisive ignited in my chest. It was not warmth. It was the cold, focused heat of a welder's torch, ready to cut through the lies and sever what needed to be severed. I picked up the phone again. I dialed the number on the card. It rang twice. Marcus Thorne. His voice was professional, alert. "Mr. Thorne, this is Eleanor Vaughn." I paused, ensuring my breath was steady. "We need to talk. I am ready to cooperate fully." The following Tuesday at 10 in the morning, I was seated in a booth at the Cozy Corner Diner. It was my regular place, 3 blocks from my house. I had a cup of black coffee in front of me. I did not touch it. I watched the door. Marcus Thorne entered precisely at 10. He was alone this time, without Ms. Ruiz. He wore a simple button-down shirt and slacks, no suit jacket. He saw me and gave a small, respectful nod before weaving through the tables. "Mrs. Vaughn," he said as he slid into the booth opposite me. "Thank you for meeting me." "Thank you for coming here," I replied. "I appreciate the discretion." He understood. The Cozy Corner was my territory, neutral ground away from my living room that now felt like a crime scene. Our waitress, Sheila, who had served me for a decade, came over. Thorne ordered coffee. After she left, he placed a simple manila folder on the table between us. He did not open it immediately. "First, I want to say I'm sorry for what you're going through. These cases are always difficult, but when it's family—" He let the sentence trail off, his expression sober. I also want to be clear about what your cooperation entails. It's better you know everything now." "I prefer it that way," I said. He opened the folder. The top sheet was a timeline printed in neat columns. Based on our forensic document examination and the banking records, the scheme began approximately 20 months ago. It started with the submission of a false diagnosis to your insurer. This granted access to a higher tier of benefits. Then came the treatment claims. He pointed to entries on the timeline. Chemotherapy sessions billed weekly, then supplementary claims for out-of-network infusions and specialist consultations. The checks for these were issued to you, Eleanor Vaughn, and mailed to a P.O. box at the main branch on Grand Avenue. They were deposited, sometimes within hours, into your joint checking account at First Federal. First, the signatures on the deposit slips have been verified as your daughter's. The information was clinical, delivered without judgment. It was easier to absorb this way. "You have proof of the P.O. box?" He slid a photocopy from the folder. It was a P.O. box application. The box holder was listed as E. Vaughn. The signature was a forgery, but one I could see was meant to resemble mine. The driver's license number used for identification was mine. The home address listed, however, was Danny's apartment. "The box was opened 17 months ago," Thorne said. "Security footage from the post office is only kept for 90 days, so we don't have video of who accessed it. But the address is a direct link." I stared at her apartment number printed on the form. She had used my identity to rent a box to receive the stolen money she had requested using my name. The circular, predatory efficiency of it was chilling. "What about the medical side?" I asked. "The clinic?" "Metro Regional Oncology Associates does not exist," Thorne said. "It was a fabricated provider with a fabricated license number. The claims were submitted electronically. The insurance company's system paid them because the codes were correct and the initial diagnosis was in the file. It was a flaw in their automated review process. By the time a human reviewer flagged the volume of payments, a significant sum had been dispersed." Sheila brought his coffee. We both fell silent until she left. The diner's familiar sounds, the clatter of plates, the low hum of conversation, felt like they were happening behind glass. "The case is strong," Thorne continued, lowering his voice. "The documentary trail is clear. Your testimony is the human element that ties it all together. You establish the lack of medical necessity. You confirm you never saw these documents except for the ones you unknowingly signed. You confirm your daughter had access and opportunity." What does testifying mean, in practical terms? It means giving a formal, recorded statement to me and an assistant district attorney. It means you may be called to testify before a grand jury. If the case goes to trial, you would be a key witness for the prosecution. He met my eyes. Your daughter would be on the other side of the room. Her attorney would cross-examine you. They would try to challenge your memory, your credibility. They will likely use the argument she presented to you on the phone. That I am a confused old woman. He nodded once. Yes, they will try to paint you as unreliable. Our job is to show the jury you are anything but. Your demeanor, your clarity will be paramount. I looked out the diner window at the oak tree on the sidewalk. Its leaves were a vibrant green. Life went on in its ordinary way. I thought of the portrait in my closet. I thought of the sound of her voice calling me sick, confused. "What do you need from me first?" I asked, turning back to him. "A formal declaration of your intent to cooperate. We will schedule your official interview. In the meantime, start gathering any documents you have. Your personal calendar, if you keep one. Any emails or text messages with your daughter that might reference insurance, money, or your health. Your own bank statements for the joint account if you have them. We have them, but it's good for you to see the flow of funds yourself." "I have a calendar," I said, "a large desktop-style one by the kitchen phone. I noted garden club meetings, doctor's appointments when I changed the air filter. I can show you where I was on the dates of these supposed treatments." "That is excellent," Thorne said. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something beyond professionalism in his face. It was respect. That kind of detail is invaluable. "What happens to her?" The question was inevitable. "That is up to the district attorney and the court. The charges will be multiple counts of felony fraud, identity theft, and forgery. Given the amount, incarceration is a possibility. The goal will be full restitution. But I cannot make promises about the outcome. My job is to build the case. Your decision to help us does that." I understood. He was not offering me vengeance. He was offering me a role in a process, a difficult, painful, public process. It was the only path that led back to something resembling integrity. I took a sip of my coffee. It was lukewarm. "Schedule the interview, Mr. Thorne. I will be there. I will gather what you need." He let out a slow breath, as if he had been holding it. "Thank you, Mrs. Vaughn. It takes courage." "It is not courage," I said, correcting him gently. "It is necessity. She left me no other choice that I can live with." He gathered the papers back into the folder. We discussed next steps. He would email me a list of requested documents. He would call in a few days with a time for my formal statement. The meeting was over in under 30 minutes. After he left, I sat for a while longer. I finished my coffee. I paid the bill, leaving my usual tip for Sheila. I walked home under the clear morning sun. My house was quiet. I went directly to the kitchen and took the large wall calendar down from its hook. I flipped back through the months to the dates Thorne had listed. I saw my own handwriting noting lunch with Beatrice, library board meeting, dentist, 10 a.m., M. On the day I was supposedly receiving my first chemotherapy infusion, I had written plant tomatoes. I put the calendar on the table. Then I went to my small home office and retrieved the file box where I kept important papers. I found the statements for the joint account. I had not looked at them in years. Danny handled the deposits for me. She said it was easier. I sat at the kitchen table and spread the papers out. There they were. The deposits. $5,000, $12,000, $8,000. They were irregular but frequent, always marked insurance reimbursement. I had never noticed. I had trusted her. The cold, focused heat I had felt after the phone call settled now into something solid and durable, a resolve. This was no longer about emotion. It was a task, a project. I was no longer a victim in a story. I had become a participant in an investigation, partnering with principle, as Thorne represented it. I took a blank notepad. At the top I wrote, "For Marcus Thorne." I began to list the items I needed to collect. It was a start, the first concrete action on a path I had chosen. The revenge, if one could call it that, had begun not with a shout but with a list. The list on my notepad grew over the next 2 days. It was no longer just a collection of tasks. It was an inventory of my own ignorance, each item a stone of evidence I had failed to see. I worked methodically, my emotions locked away in a compartment I labeled later. The work itself became a form of anesthesia. I began with the calendar. I photocopied each relevant month at the library, highlighting the entries that proved my presence elsewhere. Garden club potluck, dentist, cleaning, Beatrice's birthday lunch. I wrote a separate explanatory note for each highlighted date, stating who could verify my whereabouts. I was constructing an alibi for a crime committed against my own identity. On the third morning, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole to see Beatrice standing on my porch, holding a casserole dish with a tinfoil lid. Her face, framed by silver curls, was set in a familiar expression of determined concern. I opened the door. "I'm not sick, Bea." "No, but you're hiding," she said, walking in without waiting for an invitation. She headed straight for the kitchen. "You missed bridge. Marjorie said she saw you at the library photocopying like a woman possessed, and you haven't returned my calls for 2 days. So I'm deploying the emergency chicken and rice." She placed the dish on the stovetop and turned to face me, her hands on her hips. Now, spill it. Beatrice had been my closest friend since Robert died. She was not a woman you could deflect. I looked at the papers spread across my kitchen table, the calendar pages, the growing stacks. There was no point in hiding it. She would find out eventually. "Danny has been stealing from me," I said. The words were simple, factual. "A great deal of money, through my health insurance. State investigators are involved. I am helping them build their case." Beatrice's eyes widened. She did not gasp or cry out. She pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. "Stealing. Danielle." She said the name as if testing its weight. "How much?" $287,000. She let out a low whistle, a sound of pure, stunned practicality. "Lord have mercy. How?" I sat down opposite her. For the next 20 minutes, I explained. The forged claims, the fake cancer, the P.O. box, the joint account. I showed her the timeline from Marcus Thorne. I showed her my calendar with its mundane, damning entries. My voice remained steady throughout. When I finished, Beatrice was silent for a full minute. She picked up one of the bank statements, her eyes tracing the fraudulent deposits. Her lips were pressed into a thin line. "That little heifer," she finally said, her voice low and fierce. "That greedy, conniving little heifer." She looked at me. "What did she say when you confronted her?" "She said I was a confused old woman, that I must have signed things I didn't understand." Beatrice's snort was one of pure contempt. "Oh, she went there." "Of course she did. The oldest trick in the book. Discredit the witness." She put the paper down. "So you're helping the state put her in jail?" "I am helping them hold her accountable, whatever form that takes." Beatrice studied my face. She saw the lack of tears, the focused calm. She nodded slowly, approvingly. "Good. You're not wallowing. You're working. What can I do?" Her immediate offer of practical help was a buoy in the cold sea I was navigating. "You can be my second set of eyes. I have to go through years of old emails, any correspondence with her. Marcus Thorne said to look for anything about money, insurance, my health. It's a lot." "Then stop yapping and fire up your computer," she said, standing and taking off her cardigan. "I'll make us some tea. You start searching. We'll print anything that looks relevant." We worked all afternoon. Beatrice took the chair at my desktop computer, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She was more tech-savvy than I was. I sorted through the physical file box of insurance correspondence from past years before everything went digital. "Here's something," Beatrice announced. "An email from her about 14 months ago. Subject line, 'Updating your files.'" She read aloud. "Mama, just a heads up. Heritage Mutual is doing a system-wide audit. They might need you to verify some past treatments or sign some new consent forms. If anything comes to the house, just forward it to me and I'll handle it. Don't worry about it. Love, Danny." That was her establishing control, I said, not looking up from a pamphlet about annual wellness benefits, making sure any legitimate correspondence from the insurer went directly to her, so I wouldn't see it and get suspicious. "Clever," Beatrice muttered, her tone grim. She marked the email for printing. "Here's another, from around the same time. Did you get the check from Heritage? They said they were sending a reimbursement for your cardiologist copay. If it comes, just let me know and I'll deposit it for you next time I'm over." "There was no cardiologist copay," I said. "That was her testing the system. Seeing if a small, plausible check would come and if I would notice. We found a pattern, dozens of emails, always casual, always framing Danny as the helpful intermediary managing the complicated world of insurance on my behalf. Each one was a thread she had used to weave the shroud of her deception. I found a physical letter from the insurance company dated about a year ago. It was a standard explanation of benefits for a minor dermatology procedure I had actually had. A line at the bottom noted, "If you have questions about claims for other services, please contact Member Services." Someone had taken a black marker and neatly blacked out the Member Services phone number. The letter had been in a pile of handled mail Danny had organized for me. I showed it to Beatrice. We both stared at the inked-out line. It was such a small, vicious act, a deliberate removal of my ability to question. "She thought of everything," Beatrice said quietly. "She really did." "Not everything," I replied. I pointed to the highlighted calendar. She didn't think I would remember my own life. By evening, we had a stack of printed emails and annotated documents 3 inches high. Beatrice helped me organize them into a new accordion folder, labeled and tabbed by date and category. The chicken and rice casserole was gone. The pot of tea was empty. Beatrice stood to leave. She put her hands on my shoulders. "You're building a fortress, Ellie, stone by stone, and it's made of truth. That's the one thing she doesn't have." After she left, I sat at the clean table, the new, heavy folder in front of me. The sense of powerless shock was gone. In its place was a concrete weight. The evidence had mass. It had heft. I was no longer sifting through ashes. I was gathering stones. And I intended to build something with them that could withstand any storm my daughter's lawyers could conjure. The accordion folder of evidence sat on my dining table, like a cornerstone. I had built a case of paper and ink, a fortress of facts, as Beatrice called it. But a question lingered in the silent rooms of my house, echoing louder as the legal machinery began to turn. Why? What had been so important, so necessary that she would do this? Marcus Thorne provided the answer a week later. He came to my house again, this time with a thinner file. His expression was grave, prepared. "We've completed a preliminary asset trace," he said, sitting at my table, "following the money from the joint account. It's not a full forensic accounting yet, but the broad strokes are clear. I thought you should know." I nodded, my hands folded in my lap. "I want to know." He opened the file. The funds were transferred out almost as quickly as they came in. Large sums were moved to a high-yield online savings account in her name only. From there, disbursements were made. He laid out a series of bank statements, not mine, but diagrams of accounts I had never seen. He pointed to line items with his pen. A series of payments to Luxury Escapes Travel, totaling approximately $42,000. There are corresponding credit card charges for flights to Barbados, St. Bart's, and a cruise in the Mediterranean, all within the last 18 months. I listened. I saw the numbers. $42,000. I thought of the rust spot on my car's roof I'd been saving to fix. Substantial payments on a late-model luxury sedan. The title is in her and her husband's name. We're looking at $35,000 in principal reduction during this period. He paused, glancing at me. There is also a consistent pattern of payments to various high-end department stores and online retailers, a significant lump sum payment to settle a personal credit card debt of about $20,000, he continued, listing more: spa memberships, restaurant charges, a country club initiation fee. The numbers added up, forming a ledger of a life I did not recognize, a life of curated comfort, of instant gratification, funded by a fictional cancer. Her husband? I asked, my voice dry. Our investigation shows he was likely unaware of the source of the funds. The money was presented as bonuses, successful investments. He is not a target, though he may be questioned as a witness. I looked away from the papers, out the window to my modest garden. The peonies had bloomed and were now fading, their petals browning at the edges. All that planning, that betrayal, for a vacation, for a car payment, for a handbag. Was there any debt? Any emergency? I heard myself ask. A medical issue for her? Something understandable. Thorne's face was sympathetic but firm. No, Mrs. Vaughn. Her credit card debt was from discretionary spending. Her mortgage is standard for their income bracket. There is no evidence of a crisis, medical or otherwise. The motive appears to be lifestyle augmentation. She saw an opportunity in your trust and in the insurance system's flaws, and she took it. Lifestyle augmentation, a sterile term for a hollow greed. I thanked him for the information. He gathered his papers, asked if I was still prepared for my formal interview the following week. I said I was. He left. After the door closed, the house did not feel like a fortress. It felt like a museum of a life that was now a lie. I could not sit still. I put on my walking shoes and left. I did not plan a route. My feet carried me. I walked past the elementary school, its playground empty in the late afternoon. Danny had played there. I had pushed her on the swings. She had wanted the highest swing, the one with the green seat. I remembered saving for months to buy her the specific brand of sneakers all the kids wanted, because she felt left out. I kept walking. I passed the old public library where I had taken her every Saturday. She would load up a stack of books, her small arms straining. She loved stories about explorers, about people who discovered new worlds. I had thought I was raising an explorer. Instead, I had raised a forger. I found myself at the park where she had her first birthday party, a simple thing with a homemade cake and a few friends. Robert had been alive then. We'd been so careful with money, budgeting for that cake, those paper plates. We wanted to give her everything, but we understood that everything had a cost we had to earn. Now she had taken everything, and the cost was me. The final stop was outside her old high school. It was a large brick building. I stood across the street watching students stream out. I remembered her in her cap and gown, her smile blazing with future. She was going to study business, she said. She wanted to understand how systems worked. I suppose she learned too well. I thought of the travel brochures for the Mediterranean. I had never been. Robert and I had talked about a river cruise in Europe for our 30th anniversary. He had died 2 months before. The dream had evaporated, and I had been content with my memories and my garden. She had gone. She had sailed on blue water I had only seen in pictures, eaten in restaurants I could not pronounce, and charged it all to a suffering that did not exist. The betrayal was no longer an abstract crime. It was a specific, personal desecration. She had traded my trust, my health, my peace of mind for trinkets and stamps in a passport. The anger I had expected did not come. In its place was a profound, weary sadness. It was the sadness of realizing the person you mourned was not dead, but had never truly existed. The daughter I loved, the one who valued stories over status, who understood the weight of a dollar earned, was a ghost. She had been replaced by this stranger with her luxury escapes and her forged signatures. I walked home in the fading light. The solid weight of determination I had carried for weeks felt different. It was still there, but it was heavier, laced with a grief that had no outlet. This was the heart of the matter, not the legalities, not the restitution. It was the sheer, pointless waste of it all. The love I had given, the lessons I had taught, the trust I had offered, all of it had been converted into currency for a life that meant nothing. I unlocked my front door. The folder was still on the table. I did not look at it. I went to the hall closet, reached behind the blankets, and took down the family portrait. I did not look at the smiling faces. I carried it to the garbage can in the garage and placed it inside, face down, under yesterday's news. It was not an act of rage. It was a disposal. The ghost was laid to rest. All that remained was the stranger and the long, cold process of holding her accountable. The garbage can in the garage held the portrait, but the legal process would not be disposed of so easily. It was a machine that had been engaged, and it required fuel. My part was to provide testimony, a formal recorded statement. Marcus Thorne called to confirm the date and time. Tuesday, 1 p.m., at the State Office Building downtown. He advised me to review my documents and to be prepared to speak slowly and clearly. The Assistant District Attorney, a Ms. Chavez, will be conducting the interview alongside me, he explained. It will be recorded. Your lawyer can be present if you have one. I do not have a lawyer, I said. It is your right to have one. The state is not prosecuting you, but some people prefer the counsel. I will speak for myself, I told him. It felt important. This was my truth, and I would deliver it without a filter or an interpreter. Understood, we will go over the sequence of events. She will ask you questions. Just answer honestly. If you don't remember something, say so. Do not speculate. After the call, I sat at my kitchen table with the accordion folder. Reviewing was not enough. I needed to own the narrative, to make it a part of me so that no nervousness, no trick question could shake it. I needed to practice. The next afternoon, Beatrice arrived. She carried a legal pad and a stern expression. "All right, I'm playing the prosecutor. A real hard nose. You ready?" I nodded. I had arranged 2 chairs facing one another in the living room. I sat in one, my hands folded over the folder in my lap. Beatrice sat opposite me, peering over imaginary glasses. "State your full name for the record," she began, her voice dropping an octave into a credible imitation of officialdom. "Eleanor Marie Vaughn. And what is your relationship to the defendant, Danielle Vaughn Carter?" "She is my daughter." Beatrice nodded, making a note on her pad. "Mrs. Vaughn, did you, at any time between January of last year and last month, undergo treatment for breast cancer?" "I did not." "Did you authorize anyone to submit insurance claims for such treatment on your behalf?" "I did not." "Are you familiar with the clinic known as Metro Regional Oncology Associates?" "I am not." I had never heard of it before Investigator Thorne showed me the claim forms. Beatrice's questions were basic, covering the ground I knew well. We went through the signing of the original documents, my lack of medical visits, the pattern of the deposits. I answered in clear, short sentences. My voice felt steady. Then Beatrice shifted. She leaned forward slightly, her expression becoming sharper, more challenging. "Mrs. Vaughn, isn't it true that you have a history of memory lapses? Your daughter has stated she often helped you manage your affairs because you were becoming forgetful." This was the attack we had anticipated. I met her gaze. "I do not have a history of memory lapses that would explain signing up for chemotherapy I did not receive. I manage my own household, my finances, and my social calendar. I have a calendar that shows where I was on the dates I was supposedly receiving treatment. I was not in a clinic. I was at my garden club or having lunch with a friend. But you admit you signed documents your daughter presented to you." I signed documents she told me were routine HIPAA forms and beneficiary updates. I trusted her. That trust was violated. Beatrice's lips twitched, almost a smile of approval at the response. She continued, "Is it possible, Mrs. Vaughn, that you are doing this out of spite? That you are angry with your daughter for other reasons, and this is your way of retaliating?" The question was a low blow, designed to provoke emotion. I felt a flicker of heat behind my ribs, but my voice remained level. "My motivations are not the subject of this inquiry. The facts are. The forged signatures are facts. The fraudulent claims are facts. The money deposited into an account she controlled is a fact. I am here to testify to the facts I know." We went on for an hour. Beatrice probed, interrupted, rephrased questions, trying to trip me up. At times I had to pause, to consult my notes to confirm a date. I did not guess. I said, "I would need to refer to my calendar to be precise," which is what Marcus had advised me to do if needed. Finally, Beatrice put her pad down. "Okay, I'm done being the dragon lady." She relaxed back into her chair. "Ellie, you're good. You're calm. You're factual. You don't get ruffled. That's exactly what they need to see. When they try to paint you as a confused old biddy, you just look them right in the eye and state the plain truth. It's powerful." "It's just the truth," I said. "That's what makes it powerful," she replied. The day before the interview, Marcus called again. "I want to prepare you for one more thing," he said. "The district attorney's office has been in contact with your daughter's attorney. Given the strength of the evidence, they are signaling an openness to a plea deal. to avoid a trial. What does that mean? It means she would plead guilty to a set of charges, and in return, the DA would recommend a specific sentence to the judge. It usually involves restitution, probation, and possibly some incarceration. The judge has the final say. If a deal is reached, your formal testimony might not be needed in open court, though your sworn statement would be part of the file. The concept was abstract, a deal, a negotiation over the consequences for a crime that felt so visceral. Would I have to agree to this deal? No, the state makes that decision. But they may consult you as the victim regarding restitution and your feelings on the matter. Your victim impact statement would still be heard at sentencing, even with a plea. I considered this. A trial would be a public spectacle. A plea would be quieter, more clinical. Both ended in judgment. I see, I said. Our goal tomorrow is to get your official statement on the record. That strengthens the DA's hand, whether they go to trial or negotiate a plea. Your participation is key. On Tuesday morning, I dressed with care. A simple navy blue dress, a single strand of pearls, neat, respectable, unassailable. I reviewed my folder one last time. I did not feel nervous. I felt prepared. I had gathered the stones, and now I would lay them in their proper place. Beatrice came over at noon to drive me downtown. I did not trust myself to park. "You look like a librarian who's about to find the president," she said approvingly. The state office building was a block of concrete and glass. The air inside was cool, circulated. We took the elevator to the 8th floor. The hallway was quiet, lined with closed doors. Marcus Thorne was waiting outside one of them. He shook my hand, then Beatrice's. "Ms. Chavez is ready. Beatrice, you can wait out here. There's a seating area." Beatrice squeezed my arm. "You've got this." I followed Marcus into the room. It was a small, windowless conference room. A woman with sleek black hair and a tailored suit stood and introduced herself as ADA Carmen Chavez. A video camera on a tripod was pointed at the chair at the head of the table. A court reporter sat ready at a stenograph machine. "Please, have a seat, Mrs. Vaughn," Chavez said, her tone professional but not unkind. "We'll begin by swearing you in. Then we'll proceed with questions. Take your time." I sat in the indicated chair. The camera lens was a dark, unblinking eye. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her machine. Marcus sat to the side, a supportive but silent presence. I placed my hands flat on the table. I breathed in, then out. The calm before. This was not an end but a necessary beginning. The legal machine was waiting. I was ready to speak my part and set it in motion. I placed my right hand on the Bible offered by the court reporter. The leather cover was cool and smooth. I repeated the words after Ada Chavez, my voice firm in the quiet room. "I, Eleanor Vaughn, do solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth." I sat back down. The red light on the video camera glowed. "Let the record show that Mrs. Vaughn has been sworn in," Chavez said. She sat opposite me, a notepad before her, though her attention was entirely on me. "This interview is being conducted in connection with case file SIB 44729, State v. Danielle Vaughn Carter. Present are ADA Carmen Chavez, investigator Marcus Thorne, and court reporter Janice Miller. Mrs. Vaughn, thank you for coming. We will be asking you a series of questions. Please answer audibly for the record." "I will," I said. She began with foundational questions. My name, address, occupation. She asked about my health. She established that I had no history of cancer. Her manner was brisk, but not unkind. Then she moved to the core. "Do you recognize this document?" She slid a paper across the table. It was a copy of the insurance claim form, the one for the first supposed chemotherapy treatment. I looked at it. I saw my name, my policy number. I recognize it as a document that was shown to me by Investigator Thorne. I had not seen it before he showed it to me. "Is that your signature at the bottom?" I examined the flowing script that spelled Eleanor Vaughn. It was a good forgery. It had the general shape of my signature, the large E and V, but the hesitation was in the wrong places. The loop of the H was tighter than I make it. It is not, I stated. How can you be sure? The slant is different. My signature slopes more to the right. The pen pressure here, I pointed to a spot on the photocopy, is even. When I sign, I press harder at the beginning of my first name. This is a simulation. Chavez nodded. She slid another document to me. This one was a bank deposit slip for $12,000. The signature line read, Eleanor Vaughn. And this? That's also not my signature. It is closer, but it is not mine. The tail on the N is too short. She proceeded this way for 15 minutes, presenting me with a selection of forgeries. My responses were the same each time, a simple, unequivocal denial. The process was clinical, like identifying a series of counterfeit bills. With each no, I felt the foundation of Danny's defense, the idea that I was a forgetful woman who had signed things she didn't recall, crack and crumble. Now, Mrs. Vaughn, Chavez said, setting the documents aside, I direct your attention to this signature. She placed a different paper before me. It was a deposit slip for the joint account. The signature was a quick, slashing D. Vaughn Carter. Do you recognize this signature? Yes, that is my daughter's signature. You are certain? I have seen her sign her name countless times, on cards, on checks. That is her handwriting. And the funds deposited with this slip, can you identify them? She placed the corresponding insurance check copy next to it. The check was made out to me. That check is from my insurance company for a treatment I did not receive. It was deposited into our joint account using that slip. So, to be clear, Chavez said, leaning forward slightly, your signature on the claim form that generated this check is a forgery. The check, made out to you, was deposited with a slip signed by your daughter. Is that your understanding? That is correct. The room was silent except for the soft tap of the court reporter's machine. Chavez allowed the fact to settle into the record. I looked at the two documents side by side, the forgery and the real signature, the lie and the proof. It was so blatant, laid out on the polished table. Chavez then guided me through the timeline. She had me confirm the dates on my personal calendar, my activities. She asked about the phone call with Danny. I recounted it, quoting her words as accurately as I could. You're a senior citizen. You get confused. And how did that statement make you feel? Chavez asked. I paused. The question ventured into emotion, which I had walled off. I considered my answer. It made me feel certain, I said. Up until that point, a small part of me hoped for an explanation, however unlikely. When she said that, I knew there was no explanation, only a strategy. Chavez made a note. Thank you. No further questions on that point. She returned to the documents establishing the chain of events, my lack of knowledge, my eventual cooperation. After 2 hours, she closed her notepad. I have no further questions for Mrs. Vaughn at this time. Investigator Thorne? Marcus, who had been a quiet observer, shook his head. No questions. Then this interview is concluded. Chavez reached over and switched off the video camera. The red light died. The court reporter stopped typing and stretched her fingers. The formal atmosphere dissipated, leaving behind the sterile room and the pile of evidence. Mrs. Vaughn, Chavez said, her professional demeanor softening a fraction. That was very clear. Thank you. Your testimony is definitive. We will be in touch regarding next steps. I stood up. My legs were stiff from sitting. I gathered my purse. Marcus walked me to the door. In the hallway, Beatrice sprang up from a plastic chair. Well, she whispered. It's done, I said. On the drive home, I was quiet. Beatrice did not press me. I replayed the 2 hours in my mind. I saw the papers on the table. I heard my own voice, calm and measured, dismantling my daughter's life. There was no triumph in it. There was only a grim finality. I had entered that room as a victim and a mother. I had left as a witness. The transition was complete. At home, I changed out of the navy dress. I hung it carefully in the closet. I made a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table. The accordion folder was still there, but its work was done. It had fed the machine. The phone rang later that evening. It was Marcus. "The statement was perfect, Mrs. Vaughn. Chavez was impressed. She's already spoken with the defense attorney. The plea deal discussions are moving forward quickly now. They know the case is airtight." "I see," I said. "You should prepare your victim impact statement. The judge will want to hear it, whether it's a plea or a trial. Take your time. Write what you feel." I thanked him and hung up. The next phase was beginning. My testimony had been the key turned in the lock. Now the gate of consequences was swinging open, and I was to have a say in what lay on the other side. I took out a fresh sheet of paper and a pen. I stared at the blank space. What I felt was a vast, cold silence. Translating that into words for a judge would be my final, most difficult task. The blank page remained a challenge for 3 days. I wrote sentences, then crossed them out. Words like betrayal and devastation felt both too large and too small. They were abstractions that could not contain the specific daily erosion of trust, the calculated nature of the deceit. I settled instead on listing facts and the consequences of those facts. Because of these actions, I no longer sleep through the night. Because of these actions, I question my own judgment in every interaction. Because of these actions, the memory of my daughter's childhood is now poisoned. I was in the middle of writing when the first ripple reached me. It was a Thursday morning. My phone rang. It was Lorraine from the Church Auxiliary Committee. Her voice was overly bright, dripping with a sympathy that had not been earned. "Ellie, darling, I was just calling to check on you. We missed you at the meeting on Tuesday. I heard you've been having some family troubles. Is there anything we can do?" The news was out. I did not ask how she knew. In a community like ours, news traveled through invisible wires of concern and gossip. "I'm managing, Lorraine. Thank you for calling." "Of course, honey. We're all praying for you. And for Danielle. Such a shame. She always seemed so together." I ended the call politely. Within the hour, 2 more calls came. One from a former colleague, another from a neighbor. Their scripts were similar: expressions of shock, offers of support, and a palpable, awkward curiosity simmering beneath. I gave them all the same bland response. "I appreciate your concern. It's a legal matter now. I can't discuss it." The real test came on Sunday. I had decided to go to church. It was my routine, and I refused to let her actions exile me from my own life. I wore a simple dress, held my head high, and walked in. The silence that fell around me as I moved down the aisle was not imagined. Conversations hushed. Eyes flicked toward me, then away. It was the sound of a community collectively holding its breath. After the service, a cluster of women approached. Beatrice materialized at my elbow, a silent sentinel. The women offered stiff hugs and murmured words. Their pity was a blanket I did not want. Marjorie, who had known Danny since she was in pigtails, took my hand. Her eyes were wet. "I just can't believe it, Ellie. That sweet girl. What happened?" "I don't know, Marjorie," I said honestly. "I truly don't. It was the hardest part. Not the anger, but the public pity. The transformation of my private catastrophe into public spectacle. I was no longer just Ellie Vaughn. I was Ellie Vaughn, the woman whose daughter robbed her, an object of fascination and whispered judgment. Beatrice drove me home. "They don't know what to say," she said, navigating the quiet streets. "So they say stupid things. Don't let it get to you." "It's not getting to me," I said. And it wasn't, not in the way she feared. The pity was an irritation, a mosquito buzz. The deeper wound was already scarred over with resolve. That evening, the phone rang again. I almost didn't answer, weary of the well-meaning calls. But something made me pick it up. It was silence at first, then a ragged breath. "Mama." It was Danny. Her voice was thick, slurred. She had been crying or perhaps drinking. "Danielle, they're charging me." The words were a wail, broken. "My lawyer says the video of your statement, he says it's bad. He says I should take the plea. They're talking about jail, Mama. Jail." I said nothing. I listened to the sound of her panic. It was not the sound of remorse. It was the sound of a trapped animal. "You have to talk to them," she pleaded, her voice rising. "You have to tell them you made a mistake, that you were confused. You can recant? They said you can recant. Tell them it was all a misunderstanding." "It was not a misunderstanding," I said, my voice flat. "How can you do this to me?" she screamed. The sound was raw, scraping. "I'm your daughter. You're flesh and blood. You're supposed to protect me." "I am," I said quietly. The words came out before I could consider them, and I knew they were true. "This is the only protection I have left to offer you. The truth, the consequences. Anything else would be a deeper betrayal." There was a guttural sob on the other end. "You're killing me. You're happy about this, aren't you? You're getting your revenge, you self-righteous old bitch." The insult hung in the air, ugly and final. I felt nothing. No sting, no fresh hurt. It was just more evidence of the stranger she had become. "I am not happy," I said, each word measured. "There is no happiness in this. There is only what is necessary. Goodbye, Danielle." I did not slam the phone down. I pressed the end button with deliberate calm. I placed the handset back in its cradle. I walked to the kitchen table where my victim impact statement lay. I picked up my pen. The call had clarified something. I knew now what I needed to say to the judge. It wasn't about my pain. It was about the difference between right and wrong, a difference she needed to remember. I wrote the final lines with a steady hand. The ripples of her crime had spread through my community, through my life, and now they were crashing back upon her. The taste was not sweet, it was of salt and dust, but it was just. The morning of the sentencing hearing was overcast, a flat gray sky that promised neither rain nor sun. I wore the same navy dress I had worn for my testimony. It felt like a uniform now. Beatrice drove me to the county courthouse, an imposing stone building downtown. We did not speak much on the way. There was nothing left to say. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined. Dark wood, rows of oak pews like a church. The air smelled of lemon polish and old paper. Marcus Thorne was waiting near the front. He guided Beatrice and me to a bench directly behind the prosecutor's table. "You'll be sitting here," he said quietly. "When the judge calls for victim impact statements, you'll approach the podium there." He pointed to a wooden stand facing the judge's bench. I nodded. I had my statement folded in my purse. I had memorized it, but I wanted the paper with me, a tangible anchor. The room began to fill. A few reporters sat in the back. I recognized no one else. Then a side door opened, and Danny entered with her lawyer. She wore a charcoal gray suit, her hair pulled into a severe bun. She looked thinner. She did not look at me. She took her place at the defense table, her back rigid. Her husband was not present. I felt a pang for him, for the life he thought he had. The judge entered. We all rose, then sat again. She was an older woman with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She shuffled papers, then looked at the defense attorney. "Counselor, I understand your client wishes to change her plea." The defense attorney, a man with a weary expression, stood. "Yes, Your Honor. After reviewing the state's evidence and consulting with my client, Danielle Vaughn Carter wishes to withdraw her previous plea of not guilty and enter a plea of guilty to the charges of aggravated identity theft and felony insurance fraud, as outlined in the amended information." The judge turned to Danny. "Ms. Vaughn Carter, please stand." Danny stood, her lawyer beside her. "You have heard the charges. Do you understand that by pleading guilty, you are admitting to each and every element of these crimes?" Danny's voice was a whisper. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you are doing so voluntarily because you are, in fact, Guilty. A pause. Yes. The judge continued through a series of procedural questions. Danny answered yes or no in that same thin voice. I watched her profile. She was a stranger in a suit, reciting lines. The daughter I knew was not in this room. That realization, which had once been a wound, was now just a fact. The judge accepted the plea. She then asked ADA Chavez for the state's recommendation. Chavez stood, her posture confident. Your Honor, given the defendant's lack of prior record and her acceptance of responsibility, the state is recommending a sentence of 10 years, suspended. The defendant would be placed on supervised probation for 5 years. Conditions would include full restitution of $287,416 to the victim, payable according to a schedule set by the court. Additionally, we recommend 1,000 hours of community service to be served at a state-approved nonprofit and mandatory participation in a financial responsibility counseling program. The judge made notes. She looked at the defense attorney. Does the defense wish to be heard? The attorney rose. He spoke of Danny's remorse, her stable employment, the fact she was the primary earner for her household. He asked for leniency. His words were competent, but they seemed to float in the air, weightless. They were not anchored in the reality of what she had done. I will now hear from the victim, the judge said, looking at me. I stood. My legs were steady. I walked the few steps to the wooden podium. I unfolded my paper, though I did not need to look at it. I looked at the judge, then let my gaze sweep to include Danny, who still would not meet my eyes. Your Honor, I began. My voice was clear, filling the quiet room. My name is Eleanor Vaughn. For 20 months, my daughter, Danielle Vaughn Carter, used my identity and my health to steal a large sum of money. She did not do this in a moment of desperation. She planned it. She forged my name. She lied to me. When confronted, she tried to convince me I was too old and confused to understand my own life. I paused, ensuring each word landed. The financial loss is significant, but the greater injury is the loss of trust, the violation of the most basic bond between a parent and a child. I am not here today for vengeance. Vengeance is a personal desire for retaliation. I have no such desire. I am here for justice. Justice is a societal acknowledgement that actions have consequences, that right is different from wrong. I looked directly at Danny now. She had turned her head slightly, listening, her face pale. I raised my daughter to know that difference. Somewhere along the way, she forgot, or she chose to ignore it. The sentence you impose today, Your Honor, should serve to remind her, not to punish her out of anger, but to hold her accountable out of principle. She needs to understand the weight of what she has done, not just the dollar amount, but the human cost. I believe a sentence that includes full restitution and meaningful community service can begin to teach that lesson. Thank you. I folded the paper and returned to my seat. Beatrice pressed her knee against mine, a silent signal of support. The judge was silent for a long moment, reviewing her notes. Finally, she looked up. Ms. Vaughn Carter, please stand. Danny stood, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I have heard the recommendations and the victim's statement, the judge began. This was not a crime of need. It was a crime of greed and opportunity, executed with a cold precision that is particularly disturbing given the victim's relationship to you. You betrayed a sacred trust. She adjusted her glasses. However, you have pled guilty, saving the state the expense of a trial and sparing your mother the ordeal of testifying in open court. I will follow the state's recommendation, with one modification. I am sentencing you to 10 years, suspended. You will be placed on supervised probation for a period of 5 years. You will pay full restitution to Eleanor Vaughn, beginning with a payment of $25,000 within 60 days, with a payment plan for the remainder to be established by your probation officer. You will complete 1,500 hours of community service, and you will attend the financial counseling program, A condition of your probation is that you have no contact with the victim unless she initiates it in writing. Do you understand these terms? Danny's voice was almost inaudible. Yes, Your Honor. So ordered. The judge struck her gavel. The sound was a sharp, final crack. It was over. The legal journey had reached its destination. Justice, in its measured, bureaucratic form, had been served. As we filed out of the courtroom, I felt no surge of victory. I felt empty, cleansed perhaps, but hollow. I had gotten what I asked for. Now I had to learn how to live with it. The hollow feeling after the sentencing did not last. Nature and the bureaucracy of restitution abhor a vacuum. The first payment from Danny arrived within the mandated 60 days, a cashier's check for $25,000. It was drawn on an account I did not recognize. I deposited it into a new account, one bearing only my name. The act was clinical. It was not a restoration. It was a transfer of funds. A payment plan was established by the probation office. A sum would arrive each month, like a bill paid in reverse. I did not spend it. I let it accumulate. The money was tainted, a permanent numerical reminder, but it was also a resource. I began to consider what to do with it. Marcus Thorne called me one afternoon a few months after the sentencing. It was a professional follow-up, but his tone had warmed into something resembling friendship. I wanted to check in, Mrs. Vaughn, see how you're holding up. I am functional, Mr. Thorne. The payments have begun. Good. That's good. He paused. You know, in my work, I see cases like yours too often. Seniors targeted by family, by scammers. The systems are confusing. The paperwork is designed to be intimidating. I have learned that, I said. I was thinking, your perspective would be valuable if you ever felt like sharing it. Not in a legal sense, but in a community sense, helping others see the warning signs. The idea took root. It was not a calling, but it was a use, a way to convert the bitter experience into something practical. I told him I would think about it. I discussed it with Beatrice over tea at her kitchen table. You should do it, she said immediately. Take some of that restitution money and print pamphlets. Rent a room at the community center. Call it Financial Self-Defense for Seniors or something less dramatic. People will come. They're scared of this stuff. I followed her advice. I used a portion of the first payment to design a simple, clear brochure. I listed the red flags: pressure to sign documents quickly, unexplained changes to insurance policies, checks issued for medical care you never received, family members who insist on handling all your mail. I worked with Marcus, who verified the accuracy of the information. The local senior center agreed to let me host a monthly workshop. The first workshop was on a Tuesday morning. I expected a handful of people. Nearly 30 showed up. They filled the folding chairs in the activity room, their faces attentive, some nervous. I stood at the front, my notes on a podium. I did not tell my personal story. I presented the facts of how certain frauds operate. I showed them samples of real insurance forms versus fake ones. I taught them how to request their own claim histories. A man named Walter raised his hand. But what if it's your own kid? How do you protect yourself from that? The room went quiet. All eyes were on me. I met his gaze. The principles are the same, I said, my voice even. You have a right to see every document with your name on it. You have a right to understand every transaction in your accounts. Love does not require blind trust. True care respects boundaries. If someone, family or not, objects to your oversight, that is the first red flag. There was a murmur of agreement. After the session, several people stayed to ask private questions. I gave them Marcus's office number and the contact for the State Insurance Bureau's fraud hotline. I felt a sense of purpose, clean and direct. I was not healing others. I was providing them tools. In doing so, I was reforging my own. My life developed a new rhythm. Mornings in my garden, 2 afternoons a week volunteering at the senior center, either leading a workshop or assisting with their general financial literacy program, dinners with Beatrice. The awkward pity from the community faded, replaced by a respectful curiosity about my workshops. I was no longer just a victim. I was a resource. 6 months after the sentencing, a letter arrived. The handwriting on the envelope was Danny's. It was addressed to my post office box, which I had gotten for all legal and financial correspondence. I took it home and placed it on the kitchen table. I finished my watering. I made a cup of tea. Then I opened it. It was a single sheet of plain paper. Mom, I am allowed to write, though you are under no obligation to read or reply. My counselor suggested it. I am working at the community service placement. It is a food bank. I unpack boxes. I see people who have nothing. It is different than I expected. The financial counseling is tedious. They make us create budgets based on our actual income. It is a difficult adjustment. I am making the payments. I will continue to do so. I do not know what else to say. Danielle. The letter was not an apology. It was a report, a statement of facts. I read it once, then folded it and placed it back in the envelope. I put the envelope in the drawer of my writing desk, where I keep tax documents and warranty papers. I did not feel the need to respond. The communication was hers to initiate. The choice to engage was mine. I chose, for the moment, to let it sit. The following week, I led another workshop. It was a brighter day, sunlight streaming into the community center room. We were discussing how to safely review your credit report. Afterward, a woman lingered, waiting until the others had left. Mrs. Vaughn, she said quietly, my grandson. He's been using my car, putting charges on my gas card. I thought I was helping. After hearing you today, I'm going to put a stop to it. Thank you. She squeezed my hand and left. I packed up my materials. Beatrice was picking me up for lunch. I stepped outside into the spring air. The trees along the street were in full leaf. I saw Beatrice's car approaching. I stood on the sidewalk, my bag of brochures and samples in hand. I was alone. I was not lonely. The war was over. The peace that remained was not the peace of before. It was quieter. It was built on a foundation I had inspected myself, stone by stone. It was mine. She breathed easily, the air her own.